Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm taking a look at Ancient One, the new uniform, as well as the Tier 4. There isn't really too much to say about the uniform. It is a perfect seasonal April Fool's uniform in that it is a complete joke. You don't need this uniform for pretty much anything. The only benefit that it provides is that it gender swaps the character, meaning that you can utilize Ancient One in things like World Boss Legend in the restrictions where you can only use a male type, or perhaps using him as a support in certain ABX days, or whatever kind of restriction you need the male version of this character. This uniform doesn't change the character in any meaningful way. He is not a damage dealer, he is still just a support, and even the support capabilities basically didn't change. I believe it's only a 5% increase to element damage, which is hardly worth the higher tier cost that the seasonal tag is associated with this uniform. Ancient One obviously also has Reflect in his kit, but nothing else was added to boost his PvP capabilities either, such as an iframe ignore, so that the Reflect damage he deals can actually hit all the meta or stronger opponents now that stay in iframes when they deal damage. So even for a Reflect pylon, he isn't really very good anymore because a lot of characters just hide in iframes, so you're not going to be reflecting any damage back, as you'll see from the testing that I did with him. The first test I did was to take the old uniform into a stage 30 of Null without using her leadership or supports, and oddly and funny enough, the support capabilities that she provides the characters is for element damage, which the character doesn't deal themselves, so you don't even benefit from your own support capabilities. No surprise that the old uniform doesn't really do that well in PvE as a damage dealer, but I was still able to complete stage 30 of Null with roughly around 40 seconds remaining. The new uniform is hardly better. It's about a 20-second difference, which is absolutely terrible for a seasonal uniform that has a higher price point. If they wanted to make him as a standalone damage dealer, the least they could have done is maybe make the character actually deal element damage so that they benefit from their own support capabilities. If that isn't the route they wanted to take and just wanted to make this character a very powerful support, then they could have at least buffed the numbers across the support aspects, or even made the uniform passive that increases buff and debuff effects or whatever it is actually apply to all allies, so you have even more passive buffs that you can apply to your other characters. The current uniform doesn't really do anything for PvE. I would say that C3 of Rage is the only viable option if you want to use the character as a damage dealer for PvE, but I would highly recommend you don't because he is awful. The rotation that I use for the character is to do a 1 cancel 4, which you delay cancel after he hits the ground, and then you do a 2 cancel 5 cancel 3. When you have your ultimate, you do the same rotation, but you finish with the 6th skill. As usual, the level 80 upgrade was able to take off about a minute and 30 seconds from the clear time. Besides the damage being awful and the ultimate taking a literal century to finish, probably why they're ancient, is that the character has no healing. They have the same level of healing that characters had maybe in 2018. The only one that you have for healing is the 5th skill, and it for some reason doesn't kick in at the beginning. It kind of just re-triggers after a few seconds or something, or maybe at the end. I'm not entirely sure how the healing from the 5th skill works, but it's absolutely terrible and is not enough to allow the character to be used as a damage dealer in PvE. The 5th skill is an aura bubble that also heals all allies, but the healing percentage is horrible. It should be 5% every second, but it doesn't seem like it is, and that is still a terrible value because characters like Rescue, for example, heal about 30 or 40% every second and also provide that healing aura bubble to all allies as well. Because of this, I was only able to get Gore down to the last 10 health bars of the first phase, ended up dying with around 2 minutes and 40 seconds remaining. Thankfully, the tier 4 skill for Ancient One provides him with healing and also increases his attack, but really the only value that you're getting from it is the healing, and only for PvE, since the attack increase will hardly make a difference because the damage is so awful. The energy attack increase at 17,000 seems good, and the HP increase is somewhat decent at 20,000, but will only really have any kind of value or significance in PvP, and even then it's kind of questionable for the reason I mentioned, because the character doesn't have iframe ignore. A lot of characters will just avoid the reflect damage being sent back to them. In terms of the striker, just use whatever, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to be using this character for PvE in terms of a damage dealer, so the striker has no real significance. But with the tier 4 upgrade, I was able to clear the same first phase, those 10 health bars, about 1 minute and 20 seconds faster, and actually having the healing allowed me to clear the entire stage with roughly around 1 minute and 45 seconds remaining. In Alliance Battle Extreme, the character is equally not good because he doesn't have a high hit count and an extremely slow ultimate skill that you borderline just want to cancel. He doesn't have all of the cancel effects for the different seasons either, and with no damage proc, which is what I've been using throughout all of this PvE testing, I was able to hit roughly around 8 million or 8.3 million with him. As I mentioned at the start of the video, the only real benefit that this uniform provides is allowing you to use the character for the male restrictions, since you can gender swap the character. Right now, it doesn't seem like he provides any kind of value in ABX, since the male character for those restrictions doesn't deal element damage, but in the future, if a meta character comes up that does deal element damage, then you can use Ancient 1 to boost them up. At tier 4, I was able to improve Ancient 1's score by roughly around 2 million, but is well below what many other tier 4 characters can do with multiple supports. Ancient 1's PvP performance is hardly better than his PvE performance. He doesn't have any of the modern effects that you would need for the character to excel in PvP. The only real effect that you have going for him is the reflect damage, so the only real build that I can recommend for the character is to go tanky, and from those options, because his healing is so bad on the 5th skill, it borderline seems like it's bugged, because you can see oftentimes he'll open with the 5th skill and the kind of AoE effect will appear on the ground, but he won't get the 1 second or the 5 to 10% heal every second that is associated with it triggering every second. He just sits there and doesn't get any healing. So because of that, the only kind of defensive CTP that I would recommend for him is the CTP of Authority, because you can just try to stay invincible as long as possible to reflect damage back to the opponent, and because if you have the artifact, you can gain more damage reduction that you can stack up with the steal effect. You can see oftentimes from these clips that he is taking out the opponent mostly just from spawning in and having the lingering damage being reflected back to the opponent, but when he fights the opponent head-on, like Sentry for example, they just iframe way too much and stay in iframes where the reflect damage doesn't hit them back. So the character would have absolutely needed iframe ignore, or at least some kind of skill to provide that, even if it's that skill that applies it across all other skills or whatever it is. He would need the iframe ignore for the reflect damage to really have much value, and for seasonal uniform I would think that that would be a nice association with it. But besides that, the healing is absolutely terrible and definitely needed to be increased if the character was also supposed to have some kind of support capabilities in PvP too. I mean, you can see just how bad it is where the character, if they're lucky, 99% of the time they won't, but if they reach their tier 4 skill, even then they struggle to take out characters like Sentry and basically have to luck out to kill him. The way you're going to use Ancient 1 in Alliance Conquest now is largely the same as you did before. You're either going to use them at the top team to basically wipe out revives or immortality effects from the first team so that the second team can clean them up, or you're going to do the reverse where the top team will trigger the stuff and then the second team will just reflect the damage back and finish the team off. And again, like before, you're going to be using Ancient 1 only versus energy damage dealing characters, because the blast type doesn't really mean anything versus combat types that can just iframe ignore through and basically kill the character in one hit. Characters that Ancient 1 will be good against are ones that have high burst damage and don't go into iframes for a long period of time. So that would be characters like Jean Grey, for example, Magic, Strife, and in some cases Adam Warlock, depending on the builds, and if you get lucky with that initial burst reflect damage. Honestly, this uniform is a complete dud, and the devs should really consider buffing it tremendously. It is a waste of a uniform, especially for Seasonal 1, and even if it was a regular uniform, it would still be a complete fail because it doesn't really do anything for the character. The only real value that you get for Ancient 1 this update is getting them to Tier 4, allowing them to be used in things like World Boss Legend Plus, and getting some of those stat increases for things like Alliance Conquest and PvP as a reflect pylon. The uniform itself has basically no value. If the devs really wanted to make this a standout support uniform and worthy of the seasonal pricing, then they should have made the uniform passive effect apply to all allies. They should have increased the healing on the 5th skill from 5% to at least 20% or maybe 25% and actually trigger every 1 second. And to go even further, make that the striker skill, so if you use the character in things like World Boss Legend as one of the 5 striker options, that you can actually get a heal bubble to help out whatever character you're using too. This would also greatly benefit the character's use in Alliance Conquest, since you can not only heal yourself to deal more reflect damage, but also your allies. The devs seem pretty hesitant to give characters iframe ignore that have some kind of use for PvP, and even if they do, they don't really give them the full kit for them to excel. So if that's the case, one of the things that they could do for Ancient 1 is have a conditional iframe ignore activate if they get under a certain health percentage. For example, if he drops under 50 or 40%, he can have an iframe ignore buff activate for, let's say, 5 seconds or something, and then actually have that reflect damage have value and the healing also synergize with it. That essentially sums up Ancient 1. The uniform I find is pretty much pointless and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I believe that the next character that might be getting an upgrade is Electra. She was data mined, so if that's the case, whenever she drops, I'll probably review her. If you actually enjoyed this video, found it entertaining or useful, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this with others. It can help them out, and as I've mentioned multiple times, it also helps my channel grow so I can make more videos for people to basically learn and enjoy the content or game in another way. As always, I also appreciate people taking the time to watch my videos, so thank you again, but the video is now over.